I'm joined by Dr Stavros Nicolaou. He's a member of the South African BRICS Business Council. He's also Aspen Pharmacare Group's senior executive responsible for strategic trade development. Thank you very much, Stavros, for joining us. So one of the big questions is how Donald Trump will view a country like South Africa in terms of trade, more so because we are a member of BRICS, which not only includes its founding members, but now Iran as well. But having said that, of course, Trump is a big fan of India and is pretty much in the same boat. Is this an issue that's keeping you up at night?
Firstly, thanks very much for having me on this afternoon. And I think often very difficult to predict all of these things. I mean, they remain highly fluid. I think let's focus on what we do know. I mean, we know that the relationship between the US and South Africa has been somewhat frosty. There have been ups and downs over the last 4 years, the Biden administration. There were times where there were highs and then we went down to lows. So I think this presents a fresh opportunity, does the Trump administration, to somewhat recalibrate our relationship with the United States. And I think we need to recognize that the US remains one of South Africa, if not its most important trading and investment partners. And it's really important to get to grips with what our trading patterns look like and what the impacts might be. Now, we should recognize that we run a trade surplus with the United States, and United States is one of those countries where we export value-added manufactured products. I'm not saying that they're the only important trading and investment partner. We have many others. But of course, you have to look at where your best economic interests lie. And I think we now have a fresh opportunity to somewhat recalibrate the relationship. Now, let me answer directly to the question that you raised. Should this be keeping us awake at night, or is this keeping us, me personally, awake at night? I think many things are keeping us awake at the moment. The geopolitics are somewhat uncertain. But I think let's look at some of the positives. I think the first thing is South Africa assumes the presidency of the G20 in the next few days. In fact, as soon as 5 or 6 days' time. The United States will be the country that takes over from us after that. So South Africa will be followed by the US. The G20 remains an immensely important institution, particularly when it comes to the economy and economic conversations. And it would be in nobody's best interest, neither the US nor South Africa nor the world's for that matter, that you have a frosty relationship between the two countries as we would hand over to the United States.
Yeah.
So these are the little things we need to look at in recalibrating the relationship.
Yeah. Stavros, I know that you like to look at things, through the sort of half full prism as opposed to the half empty. But the reality is that we've got like 70 days before this president comes back on the scene, and we have experience of him before that is highly unpredictable and that he makes decisions quite quickly, and he's made these threats. So I know that you're saying that we must focus on what we know, but a lot could change in the next 3 months, and hence it's important for us to have this conversation about, how can we preempt any changes that may come, and if America does follow through, Donald Trump does follow through on his threats, how can South Africa try and mitigate that? I mean, one of the issues, of course, is the discussion around AGOA. Concerns are being raised that we might be removed from AGOA, or it could be done away with altogether for all African nations, because America or Donald Trump, is very particular about trade being a mutually beneficial enterprise. And like you said, we do have a trade surplus with the US. And if he's of the view that we have that because we have the benefit of AGOA and it's not necessarily beneficial to the United States, this is something we need to be worried about.
Yeah, so let's have a look at what might the impacts be. I think, let's say, worst case scenario, there's no reauthorization of AGOA, And let's say that the other important thing for South Africa is we're a significant recipient of PEPFAR funding, which is AIDS relief funding. So those could be two measures I think that might be affected, or two levers, if I can call them that might be affected. Now, President Trump was the president of the US when AGOA was in place 4 years ago. He was also the president when PEPFAR was in place. And although he might have had a negative perception of Africa in some way, I don't recall in his administration a direct threat to cancel AGOA. Okay, and neither can I say the same for PEPFAR. I think a concern arises from a more protectionist United States, where tariffs are increased, by way of example. Now, we should also recognize that AGOA is important for us. It's important from a confidence-building perspective, but it's certainly not the biggest part of our trade with the United States, and neither is it the biggest part of our exports to the United States. So I think we should recognize that as well, because if we're going to be true to the numbers, and the numbers are really what count here, let's take the worst case scenario. I think the impact is not that big as, or not as large as some people perceive it to be in terms of overall trade with the US. But I think where we should take some comfort here is that President Trump at the time when he was in the White House, I don't ever recall him saying, look, I'm going to cancel AGOA, or I'm never going to reauthorize it, or that I'm canceling PEPFAR. So I think let's take some of the positives there. But I think the other thing is, to put it bluntly, I think his biggest beef right now is with China.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that we don't give ourselves unnecessary increased focus here, which is probably not where his focus is going to be.
Yeah.
But I think, look, all of these things are really important, but it does demonstrate one really important aspect, and that is we need to be better aligned as a country in terms of our economic policy and our foreign policy. We need to bridge the two. And I must say, Minister Lamola, I think, is making efforts in that direction. And we need to keep bridging that gap so that we don't leave room for the Trump administration or anybody else to say, look, this is not a favored partner, so let's trade less with them. So aligning policies is a really, really important consideration for me. And I think the best thing that we can do by way of mitigating risks is to get that alignment.
Yeah. Look, Stavros, we're running out of time, and you touched on China, which is very important. Maybe we'll have that conversation for another day, because that is South Africa's largest trading partner. And if they're hit with 60% tariffs, of course, everything's speculative at this moment, it could have impacts. But we'll have that conversation another day. But what I wanted to ask you is how concerned you are as business around, the EU introducing this carbon border adjustment mechanism, essentially basically raising tariffs for those exporters who don't produce their products in a clean manner. They use coal or they use oil or whatever it may be that's dirty to produce their goods. And then when they land in the European Union, they'll be that much more expensive because of tariffs, making them uncompetitive. This is something that is going to happen in 2026. Is South Africa ready? Are South African firms ready? Do people know enough about this? And how concerned are you about this?
Look, it is a concern of businesses. I think we've always taken an approach as business, certainly organized business and individual companies, that have a material carbon footprint, have always taken a view that we need to strike a balance between not destroying industries on the one hand, but then also becoming a lot more green energy focused. And it's a very fine and delicate balance. I mean, arguably, these tax adjustments by the EU will tilt that balance away from sustainability of industries in this country. I'm not saying it's going to do so massively, but it is a concern, of course, because it will make us in the first instance less competitive. So I think the conversations we need to have with the EU, and I think we enjoy a good and healthy relationship with the EU. The EU ambassador here, Sandra Kramer, is someone that I believe believes strongly in South Africa and its future. And I think we need to have these conversations on an ongoing basis so we find that balance. Don't get that balance right, then unfortunately there are impacts.
Yeah. Stavros, we're going to leave it there, but thank you so much for your time and insights there. That was Stavros Nicolaou, Dr. Stavros Nicolaou.
Thanks for
He's
having me.
a member of the BRICS Business Council.